Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. As you can see, I have with me Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, who's going to take us through a story which we all like to hear very often on a break when we are bored. Pakistan. Jokes apart, it's a comedy of tragedies which is actually unfolding in that country, and it's sad to actually see when you look at it, leaving apart the entire fury that each one of us Indians have against that country. uh, the situation is actually going bad to worse with the entire political drama which is playing out there, and the blame game for the complete crab mentality which is taken over the country. uh, so it's Pakistan has been now not surprising anyone with anything anymore. That's like the baseline that I would like to say. Anything that you can imagine can go wrong in a country, and I'm talking about this keeping in full view of Sri Lanka, and the crisis is going through. But sir, having said that, I'd like to still ask you. They took out their national security policy. The army seems to be. Let me put that very clearly, neutral. Do you see a change in focus in the establishment of Pakistan in the current scenario, sir?
Uh, if you ask me this question, Adi, first of all, thanks a lot. We meet again, and we're going to discuss something which normally everybody feels that he's an expert about, and that is Pakistan. So, so I'll be adding some more confusion to that understanding of Pakistan as far as the Indians are concerned. My take is that there is a change in focus on paper, and note these words very carefully. These are meant because of certain ground realities which Pakistan is facing. And since the Pakistani military does not have the confidence to take over the country, it wants to prop up governments which can take the blame for all the chaos which is taking place in Pakistan, yet sit behind and run these governments like puppets, right? And I had spoken about this in my even past interactions, that there is a hybrid model of governance which is going on in Pakistan, where military is the king, the proxies are the civilian political leaders, and the tools are mullahs and the militaries, right? So this is a hybrid triangular model of Pakistani governance for the last about 15 years since Musharraf left. And because of this policy, over a period of time and over dependence on China and pulling back of the US, has led to this country into a huge economic crisis. Crisis would be an understatement. It would be a doomsday scenario as far as the economy of Pakistan is concerned. We will talk about it a little more later. So there was a need felt to change things on paper. And to do that, what best is that to take out a national security policy document applicable for the next 5 years with a focus on human security, with a view to build a model Pakistan on the model of Riyasat-e Medina. Have you ever seen a national security policy of a country being built on religious faith? Nowhere in the world a national security policy is built on religion. It is the only country which says that it will build Pakistan on a Riyasat-e Medina model. These are the words of the Pakistani Prime Minister, the then Pakistani Prime Minister, who made these statements, and a month later he had to bite the dust by the very establishment which had propped him up in the power, and he had to go home. So, in an in an environment of virtual autocracy, following a national security policy with a changed focus from geopolitics to geoeconomics is going to be virtually impossible. Geopolitics will remain the center focus of Pakistan for times to come. There are reasons why this change in focus has been done by Pakistan, and I shall cover it subsequently. Why Pakistan has gone in for change in focus of national security policy, which was hitherto military centric.
One of the funniest things that I find about Pakistan is the latest realization of geoeconomics, and I think this term is being used more in Pakistan itself, and it may not even be a recognized term around the world. But when one actually looks at this particular statement, and it's when you see their television sets of their so-called experts discussing geoeconomics as the way forward, one really wonders how is it a country that is looking for national security to be its prime motive of existence, because it is supposed to be a national security state, uh, forgetting the fact that there is no national security possible without an economy being there.
Absolutely. See, there are two parts to this. Why is Pakistan changing its tag to geoeconomics? First of all, as you said, geoeconomics till date has not had an accepted definition. However, there is a Wikipedia definition of geoeconomics, which means that utilizing geography to promote economics in a very simple terms. But that notwithstanding, the reasons for change are firstly virtual isolation of Pakistan and excessive dependence on China, which led to lack of loans from IMF, hounding by the FATF, and reduced assistance from the OIC countries. This virtual isolation actually stopped the coffers of Pakistan, which now it has tried to gain some loans from Saudi Arabia. IMF has given it a bailout package, and the Chinese have rolled over 4.2 billion loan of Pakistan. So it has been given not a fresh breath of life, but I would say just enough air to remain above the water. And the doomsday is not very far if they continue to behave like this. If the country has the energy prices floating at 156 rupees is the oil petrol, 126 rupees is diesel, kerosene of all the things, 123 rupees a liter. Kerosene, which is a poor man's fuel. So therefore, their economy, the external debt, 51 trillion Pakistani rupees. IMF loan, 1.53 trillion Pakistani rupees. How are you going to survive just by borrowing and borrowing? A large Sri Lanka is going to happen to Pakistan, which is not good for India. Which is not good for India. It is definitely not good for India, because unstable Pakistan would mean a Pakistan being directly or indirectly ruled by China. Chinese have in fact even asked for permission to bomb the BLA militants should their CPEC be under threat. So it's a catch-22 situation as far as India is concerned. We would like Pakistan to remain afloat, not break into pieces, because that would bring the enemy closer home from two directions. As such, I have been talking about Gwadar port now being almost in the hands of the Chinese. So with the Hamban Tota and Gwadar being with the Chinese, the Arabian Sea is virtually of the Chinese. And in this guerrilla warfare under the water by 18 plus 62 submarines, 18 of Pakistan, and out of the 62, even if 30% come this side, we have work at our hands. So what I'm trying to say is, first was virtual isolation, so they wanted money. That was the major reason why they have changed their policy, named it as shift in focus from geopolitics to geoeconomics. That was the first reason. The second reason, which I would like to say, is that it is a facade. And for this, I would quote certain Pakistani commentators. I was the other day listening to a Pakistan Air University webinar on national security policy, in which essentially they were all academicians. There were three ladies and there were two gentlemen. The two gentlemen were Tugal Yami, a professor in National University of Science and Technology, Pakistan, and there was Azhar Ahmad. Now, both these gentlemen questioned the very basis, very premise of the national security policy of Pakistan. They said, how can there be geoeconomics as a central focus? Geoeconomics is the cuff. It's geoeconomics is the symptom. The main problem is geopolitics, and they're right. In fact, if the geopolitics is right, economy will flourish on its own.
Automatically, yes.
So you are right when you say that how can geoeconomics be the central focus of a policy? So it's a facade, and facade to fool the international agencies in keeping Pakistan afloat from its economic problems. The second reason which the third reason which I want to give that it is a facade is their policy itself reads that the focus of geoeconomics is to supplement geopolitics or geostrategy. If your human security was the central focus, as Prime Minister of Pakistan has said, or as it is enshrined in the new security policy, then the the geoeconomics should have gone into uplift the human elements of Pakistan, their well-being. It says it will supplement the geopolitics, which means that human security is just a eyewash or just playing around with the world. See, if I'm focusing on geoeconomics for human security, then human security should have got the bulk of money. But here you have 4% of the GDP continuing to be spent on defense, with a country which has $11 billion foreign exchange left, that's all. And it is reducing at 20% every year. So these are the facts which I would like to say that it is just a facade of change in focus. Focus still remains geopolitics or military centric approach.
Funny thing that you mentioned about the 11.7 billion, sir, but actually when you dig a little deep, you realize about 3 billion is Saudi Arabia, 2 point some billion is UAE, and some 2 point some billion is China. So, and recently a news came out when Shahbaz Sharif literally went to pay his, respects to the motherland, Saudi Arabia. One could realize that the Saudis were not very impressed, and I don't think the thing is going to get turned around because Pakistanis have literally cut that out of their regular conversations. As a matter of fact, the Chinese have asked them for some 300 billion rupees, Pakistani rupees, for their electricity project. So I wonder where this whole thing comes out to write a policy, as you very rightly brought out, when your economy is not in right space. And I think the connection that you put across with regards the geopolitics being right and the economy will automatically, because it works on trust. I think that's one of the things which is down. Talking about trust, sir, one of the biggest things between India and Pakistan is the trust factor between both the countries. We recently read a news about the current government putting in a trade counselor into focus within India so that some trade relations with India could start up. Now, the question that I want to ask you is that are they doing this, taking these steps about better relations with India because they can't afford not to have these relations with India anymore?
See, Pakistan also realizes that to the international community, they must project their utmost effort in building bridges with India, because it has to go around to Russia for help, it has to go around to OIC for help, and today, if you keep track with the international relations, you will find that India is enjoying better relations with the West Asian and the Middle East countries than Pakistan, and there are reasons for it why it is so. So, therefore, Pakistan somehow wants to project that it wants to normalize the relations with India. So, therefore, in their national security policy, they have given out certain statements related to economy with India. Although, let me tell you, they have not devoted much of space to India in the national security policy, probably trying to take a cue from the Indians, who say that, look, Pakistan doesn't matter for us. As far as we are concerned, we have a serious adversary on our eastern northern frontier. So probably taking a cue from that, they have not mentioned much about India, but indirectly they have mentioned two three places which are of concern to us. First of all, they have said that they would like to mend ways with India, independent of the Kashmir factor. Now, India cannot ignore Kashmir, neither Pakistan can ignore Kashmir. For reasons that terrorism is being bred by Pakistan into Kashmir, which by India, it is our integral part based on the facts which are existing on the ground. India has said that terrorism and talks will not go together. So, if you continue to foment terror, and this I'm making a very serious statement, they're broadening the effort of terrorism. You see, first they had kept it restricted to the Srinagar Valley, then they shifted it to Poonch Valley, then they shifted it to the Samba Pathankot sector, and now they are shifting it to entire Punjab. With the kind of happenings which are taking place in the last few days, which each one of us is privy to, and I don't want to add fuel to fire, and with the kind of drones which are cutting across the Punjab border, uh, either for narcotics or even for supplying arms and ammunition across to the anti-national elements, the entire conflict zone is being expanded from north till as good as Suleiman ki head work. I mean, that's the entire Punjab is trying to be rolled into this policy of so-called terrorism. So, with this kind of an approach, you expect that India will mend its ways as far as economy is concerned. Just for this reason, I don't think it is possible till you show actions on ground of seriousness to curtail terrorism. India is not going to bite to the bait which they have given about, we will progress with economy based on your independent of Kashmir policy. Not going to happen. ISI has just recently, there is a report which has come that they have created a new force for Punjab, which is called Lashkar-e-Khalsa.
Khalsa.
You could hear about Babbar Khalsa, but a Lashkar-e-Khalsa is a dangerous combination. Lashkar with a Khalsa is a very dangerous combination with the American arms floating around with the Baluch, TTP, and now if they go in hands of the so-called Lashkar-e-Khalsa or even Babbar Khalsa which were there earlier, I think India is in for a serious challenge, security challenge, and we have to be better on guard as far as this particular thing is concerned. So I don't think India-Pakistan relations are going to be any better because of this national security policy, which seeks to promote economics without solving the politics. I'm afraid it's not going to work.
That's the funny part about it. So they expect, every time there is some sort of a movement, you find the Pakistanis now the turn is towards India to make the first step and all that stuff. It's really funny that one actually gets to hear this kind of a rhetoric most of the times. So we see the Pakistanis actually talking about foreign policy as if it's selling bananas on the street. They're basically discussing foreign policy in jalsas and in these rallies and in these very shoddy little the television programs that they have, without realizing the factor that all this that they mention is being looked at by people who are interested in Pakistan or even are looking at Pakistan as to what is happening, and it damages the relations even further. Now, my question to you is that foreign policy normally is a quiet affair discussed by very few in the country who know about it and how to speak about it. This whole drama of actually bringing it to the public discourse, how do you think is going to end up for the Pakistanis? Because they've had incidents with foreigners before as well, sir.
As far as speaking in public is concerned about foreign policy, I think that's the culture of this part of the world. Everybody seems to be an expert as far as foreign policy is concerned. Even a person who has absolutely no idea would have a view on anything related to foreign policy. More importantly, a nation which has its locus of control externally placed will always talk about foreign policy. And what I mean by this is for every problem of Pakistan, it puts the blame on external factors. You look at the entire national security policy of Pakistan, when it is talking about the fact that our country is going through an internal divide amongst various linguistic groups, it is still not recognizing two factors. One, that it is because of their own policies. Two, it is because of imposing a single language over a different type of people in their country: Hindis, Baluch, Pashtuns, Kashmiris, Baltis. You are making Urdu as your primary language over all these people, ignoring their linguistic and the cultural aspirations. Obviously, your problems are internal, but the national security policy says that this is because of external factors. It mentions it in no clear words. I mean, no ambiguous words. Clearly, it mentions that it is because of external factors that we are undergoing internal fissures, internal rifts amongst ourselves, because it has been developed by essentially Punjabi speaking academia of Pakistan, which ignores the differences in Pakistani society, puts the blame on external factors, and in external factors, without mentioning India. India is the major factor which is being blamed for all these problems. So obviously, how can you do this? You can only do if you talk about foreign policy. So even Hafiz Saeed will talk about foreign policy because his problem is stemming from foreign policy. If the Saudis are not giving loan that freely now to you, or dole now that freely to you, try to understand why the Saudis and the UAE is not giving loans to you. See, the Americans have withdrawn 60,000 of their troops out of the 1,20,000 which were placed in the Middle East. And now they are talking of further withdrawing them. They are worried about their own security. So are they going to give loans to you, or they're going to worry about their own security? And for that, they have to approach countries like India. They are already forming a quad, Western quad, as they are talking about. They are ignoring you. So therefore, they have to again go back to the fact that I must talk about foreign policy. That all the problems which Pakistan is facing is because of external factors. I am holier than thou. I have no reasons to say that I am to be blamed for it. So, hence, I think somewhere they are justified in following the narrative which has been built over a period of time as far as Pakistan is concerned of two nation theory. Again, it was an external factor. The birth of this very nation has been externally oriented.
That's an interesting factor, sir. I always blamed it to being immature. Well, that part, I think what you also said is an additional factor to their discussion of foreign policies, such a open manner and actually damaging themselves more than required.
To some extent, even we, if something happens, our first finger goes to Pakistan. It's subsequently that we try to do the investigations, and there are people who then look into the matters properly, and then we decide whether somebody has to be blamed or not to be blamed. But this I think like you said, could be part of a immature trend as well.
Sir.
But more importantly, it's the external orientation of the country.
Sir. Let's talk about Imran Khan before we get on to the crux of the matter, which a lot of us Indians would be interested in, sir. Imran Khan has been able to create something within Pakistan that Pakistan has not seen. He's been able to create a divide within the armed forces, which is pretty much wide in the open today. It's not something that is being speculated within India. It's being spoken about within Pakistan itself, and it's being criticized within Pakistan. You also have a government whose feet are weak right now. They're running to London for every little consultation, and financially, they're not very strong. How do you foresee this whole Imran Khan situation? Because as I look at it, there are only two options for Pakistan: either Imran Khan comes back or Imran Khan doesn't, and that would be the deciding factor, sir. So, how do you see this whole Imran Khan position kind of take going forward?
You see, Imran Khan was part of the system which I told you how he came to power. He was propped up by the military, and when the military found that he was trying to be one up against the very instrument which created it by causing a rift, as you are aware of the DGISI fiasco, which happened without Bajwa's tacit consent. The military from then on was actually bent upon showing Imran Khan the door. It was looking for the model which it has created, and it found Tehrik-e-Labbaik and willing civilian politicians to create the rifts which were required in the society and thereafter in the assembly to uh, to ensure that Imran Khan's days are limited. In fact, Imran Khan realized this issue and he probably felt that he had enough support to carry him through even through this particular crisis. But I believe, and I've been told by many that he was given a dressing down by the military to step down, and it was then only that he resigned from his post and moved out from his house in the wee hours of the night. So what I'm trying to say is that Imran Khan's days are going to be only dependent on the autocrat which Pakistan has and which is the military. You see, Shahbaz is a temporary factor in this whole game. They are looking for the 5 year period to get over and fresh elections are brought in. Fresh people will be propped up by the military and a new government will come into place. At that point in time, Pakistan is military is known not to repeat a failure. So it is unlikely that Imran Khan will be propped up by the army again. And unless you have the support of the army, you are unlikely to win. The only factor which is going against the army is the TTP.
Hmm.
TTP and the BLA are creating major problems for army's credibility.
Yeah.
If we have few more Panjgor and Panjgor type of incidents along the western front of Pakistan and few more attacks by the TTP in Peshawar and Quetta belt and Afghan Taliban also chipping in with border clashes, Pakistan military will lose credibility to a great extent. And if that happens, then the civilian hierarchy may find, or civilian politicians may find space for free and fair elections. Unless this happens, or unless the Pakistan military is shown down as it happened in 1971, civilian democracy of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto type is unlikely to emerge. And if that is not going to be the situation, it is unlikely that Imran Khan will come back. That's my take.
Interesting, sir. The ramifications of Imran Khan not coming back into power is a whole separate discussion altogether, because speculation is being made about this guy literally not believing pretty much anything that is put in front of him. So there's going to be chaos for a long, long time to come. You had mentioned that the army does this purposefully to kind of create itself and create its image, or repolish its image every a few years. I wonder how the army is going to handle this one. Coming to India, sir, as you also mentioned, and this is something very distressing to all of us, Punjab has been now slow and steady, getting on to becoming a bit of a problem. We see arms, we see these so-called Khalistani flags being put across, uh, and we see a certain resistance also forming within the state, uh, which is pretty prominent. And apart from the politics of it, where I find most of the blame. But having said that, Pakistan, keeping our discussion Pakistan centric, I'd like to ask you that Pakistan is not missing this opportunity, and a lot of it is being put across towards the new ISI chief and his, renowned focus towards Punjab. How do you see the situation being handled by Pakistan, and what do they want now?
See, Pakistan, as of today, is in a situation where it cannot afford to do anything major which may bring its credibility down and thereby impact its economy. So it is going to try everything which is uh, which is not going to raise hackles, as we say. So therefore, the activities of terror would be just below the surface of a major reaction which could take place either from India or from the international
Hmm,
community.
hmm, hmm,
So that is one thing which Pakistanis are very clear. The Pakistani military is very well versed in this game of when to raise the threshold of terrorism and not to raise the threshold of terrorism. Today, they are not in a position to do that, raising of the threshold. But working towards expanding the influence of terrorism is definitely on their card. This is not happening from now only. This is happening from quite some time. So I was saying that the Pakistan army knows at what stage to enhance the level of strikes. So as of now, you're going to see low-level strikes, low-level terror actions taking place till the Pakistani polity stabilizes.
hmm,
As of now, internally Pakistan is not stable. So I don't see any major terror strikes taking place from Pakistan. However, I do see an expansion of the terrorism in our country, expansion of the sleeper cells, whether they are of Kashmir, whether they are elsewhere in the country, whether they are being done through various perceived divisive actions of the government, which could be NRC, CAA, farmer bills, etc. So all these issues will be taken up by the elements so-called uh, favorable to Pakistani manipulations and articulations. We will see such problems occurring on a larger scale. Jahangir, Puri incidents in other parts like loudspeaker incidents. So such incidents will be flared up, and we have the counter groups also playing into the hands of such people. So automatically, the environment will be made conducive to enhanced recruitment of terrorism or terrorists in our country, and these will be exploded in our face at the right time and opportune moment. And let me tell you, the next strike is going to look as indigenous as it is possible. It would appear as though internal elements themselves have struck at us. It has nothing to do with Pakistan. That would be the next big strike which will happen in India if it happens. And that is what we should be guarding against as far as the new BGISI maneuvers are concerned. The next attack will be indigenous, propelled by them, not controlled by them, but encouraged and motivated by them through their favorable agencies and through their favorable people who are working in our country. And that is very difficult to handle than anything else. You can't even put the blame on the other country. They have also realized their mistake, where things were being traced straight away to Pakistan. So that is what we need to worry of security perspective from the security perspective. As far as India's relations with Pakistan is concerned, it is business as usual. We have to remain on guard. There is no change of focus as far as India is concerned between India and Pakistan. It is geopolitics, military centric, geoeconomics be damned as far as India Pakistan relations are concerned from the Pakistani perspective. So for us, it is business as usual. With that additional warning which I gave that the next strike will be very difficult to trace to Pakistan, and it will be in areas away from Kashmir.
Absolutely. We see a couple of states within India teetering towards a little bit of a issue.
And any statement like Lal Killa ko और Taj Mahal को तोड़ के दिखाएं. These are all being part of the overall articulation game. You will find everything coming from India now. Mufti, Mehbooba Mufti, she made a statement yesterday. Lal Killa और Taj Mahal को तोड़ के दिखाएं. How many of the people would have got motivated by this? It's no one's business.
That's the games. I think the Ukraine war has also brought it out very clearly that the art and battle of narratives and the control over people's minds and thoughts, not little control, but control over the processing of those thoughts has to be very, very clearly monitored. Because as the West is now finding out, and a lot of the public is finding out, that a lot of the propaganda that was done pro-Ukraine was, a lot of it was just a bunch of smoke, and
Absolutely,
where a lot of
absolutely,
people are now fighting back and saying, can we just stop this?
absolutely.
We need to be very careful with this, because that's one thing that I find India to be a little weak, and especially the current establishment, is the communication of there's a lot of good happening, there's no question, but communication part, I think there is a bit of a challenge. And what you've brought out is a scary feature, that we will not be able to trace stuff back. And that has been one of the solaces of that we find within our security establishment, that we're able to find the traces, and we're able to kind of pin the pieces together towards wherever it comes from, mostly from Pakistan, but wherever it does else comes from. But this is going to be a scary factor. This is going to be a bit of a challenge for us, especially in a close border state like like Punjab, where we see issues of violence and issues of misguidedness, if I may use that word, uh, more and more often nowadays. Sir, thank you so much. Educated discussion. Pakistan is going through a turmoil that is never seen in its life before, having the military coups and so on and so forth. But still, the kind of stuff that they're dealing with right now is quite serious and needs to be kept up in our focus. As always, sir, I'd like to, wish that I can get you back as soon as there's some more developments within Pakistan. And of course, to how to kind of trace these things back to Punjab, your expert thoughts on this particular thing. How can we actually prevent issues happening within our country? Till then, sir, Jai Hind.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.